Hello and welcome to the Radware and Manx Telecom DDoS presentation and overview. My name is Adrian Crawley. I'm the Regional Director for Radware in the UK and Ireland. And what I really want to achieve today is give you an overview of DDoS as a challenge in the marketplace, what's happening, some of the trends and drivers. And also get you familiarized with the offering from Manx Telecom and the benefits of DDoS protection mitigation in this area. So this presentation should be about 20 minutes long. We'll go through some of the details reasonably quickly, and then you'll have an opportunity to come back to myself or one of the Manx Telecom team with any queries and questions. So the first thing really just to go through is really what we're seeing and is DDoS a challenge in the marketplace. I think you'll see from my next slide that we've got a team, an emergency response team, that have been working for Radware for over 5 years now and are always engaged in our key challenges, key problems with DDoS globally. And what they've been doing over the last 5 years is collating data, and I want to share some of that with you right now. You can see from this slide that DDoS is not just a local problem. It is a global challenge. There are some key notable areas that don't appear to be attacked, mainly because that's often where the attackers are based. So, it is an ever-increasing challenge, not just the size and the amount, but the complexity as well. And as I say, we'll touch on some more details. Just to bring it back to a local level, I want to give you an overview of just a few examples of some recent DDoS attacks. And these are just examples that I've taken from very quick search online. They're public knowledge, they're public attacks. Just to give you a flavor of some of the diversity of the attacks. So kicking off with the top right-hand corner, obviously the World Cup is finished now, but during the session with the World Cup, they were actually targeted themselves, both the Brazilian government as well as FIFA and FIFA's sponsorship team, due to the hacktivist political view that there was too much money being spent on the World Cup. And what they actually did is they actually managed to cause challenges with the Brazilian government, leaking data, leaking emails, but also actually caused challenge with the sponsors. So a couple of the large sponsors were actually targeted and actually were taken down from DDoS attacks. So that's just again a very public image of a challenge from the hacktivists. On the top left, we have another interesting one, which is Evernote, a very popular tool that a lot of people use. And they actually had to go on to Facebook and Twitter to announce that they'd been having problems because, again, they were taken down and couldn't be accessed. So you'll see there the note just saying we're experiencing a hiccup or two for the next 24 hours. And, again, that was purely down to a DDoS attack. The bottom one is more of a random one, and again, just to emphasize that it can be anyone that gets attacked nowadays. So this is Ancestry.com, very popular website for tracking back your relatives and whether you want to or not. And actually, the view here is there's no necessary reason why or rhyme that people are being attacked. If Ancestry.com can be susceptible to these, then most other people can be as well. Now there were some financial details that were on the website, but they were not leaked. It was just more of an access challenge that they had. And one of the key things there, although they've gone to press with that it was a couple of hours of that the website was taken down, it was actually more like a couple of days where the performance was so poor that people couldn't actually use the application in itself. So those are just some examples. I know that there are plenty more out there as well. More of the reason now is really what's the motivation then behind some of these DDoS attacks. And I've really split this into 4 key areas. We've mentioned one already, which is our friends, the hacktivists. So Anonymous are probably the largest group associated with DDoS, and they are obviously politically spawned. So they often get involved in some of the larger DDoS attacks, and we'll talk maybe about 1 or 2 later. But these ones are very political, very targeted, and they're pretty well known as well. So they're going for the full press release in that point of view. Another area that seems to be on the increase as well as the ransom or extortion. Here's just a clip from a website in Russia where you can actually order your own DDoS attack. Not only do you get a DDoS attack, you get a helpline just in case there's a problem, and you can phone up and get help on how to actually focus the attack or increase the attack. And you'll see some of the figures here. So as low as $200, you can get 2,000 bots to cause a pretty significant flood volumetric attack on denial of service attack. Interesting, actually, we had an example in the UK of an online retailer that would actually held to ransom because they wouldn't give their money back to a disgruntled customer. And in the end, that customer did DDoS the retailer, online retailer, with a 14 gig DDoS attack, and actually took them down for a period of a number of days. Hindsight, actually, they were taken to court and prison, and the attackers were actually put away. But again, just to give an example of some of the challenges people are facing right now. The third area, and one of the most challenging, seems to be the competition. I've used a pretty low-level competition there, which is a black car. There's an example of a taxi service. There are a lot more high-level competition challenges in DDoS. We're currently working with a number of online gaming and gambling sites that seem to be a prime focus for people setting up fake websites that look identical to theirs, and then using a DDoS tactic to take down the live site and try and encourage people to come to their fake site. So this seems to be, a common practice now in the competition area as well, and potentially up to 50% of the larger DDoSs out there are based on this reason. And then the last one, and the most worrying for board of directors and people that are in charge of the company, is the fraud side. So, we see now that this can affect people within senior positions in companies to the extent of being taken to prison and jailed because they haven't done enough to protect the data, and there's a data loss or theft in that environment. So often on the back of something like a political activist DDoS, then you'll often see other people piggybacking on those attacks and actually trying to come in at the layer 7 and either find information or put incorrect information in, trying to leak certain details like credit cards and other information. So those are kind of the key motivations. And when we've worked with our customers and we've done reports, not just ourselves, but you'll see them done by other agencies, it's really interesting to see how many people believe that, A, whether they've been DDoSed, or B, whether they feel that they are actually protected as they are today. And so what we've seen is over half the organizations actually believe that they will be susceptible or likely to be attacked in cyber warfare. We see about 65% of organizations have had, on average, at least 3 DDoS attacks in the past 12 months. And so that figure is, from my view, extremely high. More of the issues then is nearly, on each attack, it's nearly an hour of downtime during those DDoS attacks. As I say, this is something that we've collated internally, and this is what we see from our customers. I guess what's more alarming is the fact that Cert UK, the government agency, the Cabinet Office, set up their own cybercrime unit, are actually saying a higher figure. So they believe that 90% of businesses were affected in 2013. And more so, they're looking at putting a cost onto the average issue, and their costs are ranging between 450 and 850,000 pounds. So this is very alarming. It's very concerning for people trading online and actually making sure that their presence online is safe. So Cert UK, as I say, have really taken some of our messages and taken them to that next level. Okay, so looking then a bit more detail about what are these types of attacks, what really is a DDoS attack, and how does it affect the organizations and the infrastructures that people are using. If we build a very high level and fairly simple diagram of a network, from everything from the cloud, your pipes, through all the way through to your application servers, web servers, and then the databases. What we seem to see is kind of three key areas of attacks. One is the high bandwidth, so the network flood or volumetric attacks. And these attacks are simply designed to flood your connectivity to the internet so much so that your other users cannot have access. So block your pipe into your application, so into your data center. What we're seeing is about these take up about 15% of the overall attacks that we see. The second area is then more of the network or stateful attack area, and this is where you'll have things like your network scans and your intrusion and your SYN floods. So again, these are designed specifically to take down your infrastructure, to overload your stateful devices, so your firewalls, your IPSs, and your load balancers, to overload those devices within your network. And that's exactly what we see, that the first thing that will happen is your firewall will fail over, then the IPS, and then the load balancer. So they'll just tumble over based on those attacks in those different areas. And then the last area, and probably the most challenging then, is the application attacks. So these are things like the low and slow. We'll cover one specific example, but a very challenging attack to detect and to prevent. And then things like HTTP floods, as well as SSL floods as well. So from what we've seen in the last 12 months is that SSL floods is probably number 3 for us in attacks that we're actually seeing, including things like DNS as well. I think that's the second most common attack that we can see as well. So that's a real challenge when people understand that they can encrypt the traffic and then hide it from most intrusion prevention solutions. And then you get more sophisticated then with cross-site scripting and SQL and injection attacks. So these are true layer 7 attacks designed to specifically attack your application and your databases in the back end. So what have we seen? Well, more than 50% of the attacks that we monitored last year had more than 5 different attack vectors. So if you take all these as a separate attack vector, what we've seen is the majority of the attacks that we're defending against have a mixed number of different attack vectors. So you're not protecting yourself against an attack. You're trying to protect yourself against multiple different attacks combined together, known as a DDoS attack. And that's really where the extra complexity has really come about. And that's really caused the challenge in a single point solution, not being able to protect against the breadth of attacks that we can see here today. If we just get an example then of this campaign, and we can actually see this is kind of a view of how activism has grown and become more complex over the last few years. If I just build the slides out, you'll see that we believe that they are more complex now. So we've discussed that they are getting more attack vectors, mean that the more attack vectors that you see are meaning that we'll see now up to 7 different attack vectors all at once. They are blended. So what we're talking about blended is they're not just network attacks. Okay, they're actually a mix of network and application attacks. Okay, the hacktivists are very targeted. That's something that they will focus in on a specific political target, often actually testing just beforehand, just to see if there are any challenges that they can see quickly and easily in a quick 10-minute test, and then maybe a week later coming back with a full DDoS attack. So that's the testing. And lastly, the timelines as well. What we're seeing is that most people are always going to be targeted on the most painful time possible. So maybe if it's a competitor, maybe a launch of a new product. If it's a government, obviously based on maybe a new vote or a new parliament decision, something along those lines. So that's what we're really seeing on the growth of the hacktivist attacks. So here's an example going back to 2010. Some of the very early attacks that we saw were things against people like Visa and MasterCard. And these lasted something like 3 days and had 4 different attack vectors. And if you follow that through, just in a 3-year period, The last one that the last global one that we were involved in actually was a 7-month-long attack against multiple US banks, okay, with multiple attack vectors. And that was really, a focused attack, blended attack across global areas, and lasted a lot more than your traditional week-long attacks that we're seeing today. So that's the kind of growth and challenges that we're seeing. So if we summarize that kind of in 4 key areas, this comes directly from a report that we've created, as I say, from our experience. The first one really is to show that the DDoS is the most common attack method that we're seeing now being deployed in the cybercrime environment. The second one is that actually what we're seeing is majority of these attacks that we're defending against are now lasting more than a week. So the length of time that these attacks are happening are a lot longer. The third point is where they're focused. So this is a slight eye chart, but we focus on key verticals that we believe are under a threat. And so what we're seeing is the government and financial services are still the most attacked sectors, but a lot of other sectors are now becoming more prone to these attacks as well. Utility companies, hosting companies, energy companies. So they're all coming into more of a focus on the attacks. And then lastly, as we spoke about the complexity, we're now seeing between 5 to 9 different vectors being used under the majority of the attacks that we are defending against. So those are the kind of 4 challenges that we're seeing. So what does that mean to our customers? Well, from the political point of view, this is what most people see. The public attention is on people being taken down, so outages, full outages, and we see about 27% of the time these DDoS attacks actually cause full outages. But realistically, that's not the end of the story, because the other 60%, as you can see here, cause major service level degradation, and potentially so much so that applications become unusable. They're available, but they're so slow that they actually become unusable. And so if we're looking at it from a business context, it's very easy to work out what an outage would cost to organizations such as Amazon. But more interesting for us is to look at what a degradation would cost certain organizations. And we've looked into reports where a 1-second delay on an e-commerce retail site can actually be equivalent to a 7% decrease in revenue. So that's something that people need to be considered about as well. Okay, so moving forward then, what's the future holding for us? Where's this going, and what can we do about it? The Army's on the march. This again just looks back at 2000, when we started seeing DDoS coming out, all the way through today. So it started with individual servers, potentially malicious software on there that was directed and mostly located from Russia or Eastern European. And there's a few examples that we had. But moving through the last decade, what we've seen now is that we're moving to more of a voluntary botnet now, where the hacktivists are actually getting support from people opening up their machines for them to be part of the attack method as well. So that has increased massively to thousands and thousands of potential bots out there on real users' machines. And then the latest and most challenging is a new server-based botnet, which is actually a very powerful tool that creates hundreds and hundreds of botnets per server and can be focused in different ways. And actually, some people don't even know that their own servers are being used in this way. So that's really the challenge that we're facing. And some examples of this would be anonymous, and here's just as I say, a few examples. I'm going to a couple of details actually, but some of these attacks, UDP floods and SYN floods, those are the high volumetric attacks. Then you'll have the more advanced attacks, things like the low and slow, so slow Loris and Rudy, all the way through to vulnerability-based attacks as well. So exposing challenges in applications or databases, so things like an SQL injection. So those are really the more persistent and challenging threats of the layer 7. To give you a real-world example, this is an attack called Rudy, named Rudy because it stands for "Are You Dead Yet?" This is what's termed as a low and slow attack. And what a low and slow attack is designed to do is bypass any volumetric challenges. So you won't see it as a volumetric issue. You won't see it causing an issue on your internet pipes. But what they will do is sap up and use your server resources in the back end. So here in this example of typing out a name, and rather than typing out John very quickly, you can actually space out the entry very slowly, so maybe even a 10-second delay between each letter. And that actually then at the back end in the servers causes a massive issue with fragmentation and issues in soaking up the CPU resource. You really don't need that many bots to create such a big issue on the server that the server just dies of performance and can't handle anymore. So that's a real challenge. How do you identify this type of attack, which is potentially a real entry? There's nothing malicious about the entry, but it's just done in such a slow manner. So that's one example. The other example is kill them all. Not necessarily the most creative title, but kill them all is more of a true layer 7 attack, and this is an application designed attack. So it creates real users or real transactions. They're obviously not real users, but it creates real transactions on an application and has an ability to bypass standard challenges, redirects and cookie encryptions and things like that. And this was tested against some of the top vendors and actually bypassed their security as well. You'd be pleased to know we're okay, but yeah, it's one of the ones where it appears like a real user's connecting in and can scale out massively based on using this application. So those are, as I say, a couple of the challenges that we see, or real-world challenges that we see. The kind of view is, what's the reality now? So, what's it actually doing, and what's actually challenges is it causing out there? So if we go back to our fairly basic internet setup, and we talk about the volumetric attacks, the network-based attacks, the application attacks. The volumetric attacks are really causing massive challenges on the front end. And if we look at the graph moving forward, if we look at the graph, what we're seeing, as I said earlier, is about 15% of the time the volumetric attacks are actually taking down the websites. So they cause the majority of the issue. Then we see about 40 to 45% of the time it's more network and session-based attacks that then are designed to take down the firewalls, IPSs, and ADCs. And then lastly, about the last 40% are really focused in the layer 7. So these are the true application level attacks that we're seeing, really focused in either exposing data or putting in false data in those environments. So if you don't necessarily agree with everything we've said, well, you know what, there are some independent researchers as well out there that will just reiterate the challenge that people are facing, but also the future. And so if you see Gartner at the bottom quote there, they expect that at least 25% of DDoS attacks will be application-based, and that's the fastest increase that they expect as well. And it's exactly what we're seeing as well. So those are, as I say, real-world challenges. So what can we do about it? Really, we need to be thinking about how we protect ourselves in that challenging environment of different vectors, longer time scales, different tools being used. And what we use is something called our Network Behavior Analysis Engine. And this is not just a pretty graph, but a way of us identifying in 400 different ways, over 400 different ways, whether what we're seeing is an attack, how likely it is, and what's happening. Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? And what should we do about it? Once we identify it based on the protocol and the rate-based anomaly, we can then decide how high that attack is on the degree of scale. Based on finding an attack on a high degree of scale, we then can create signatures, attack signatures on the fly within 10 seconds to protect against those attacks, or even signal to our cloud solution to actually be able to provide mitigation at a cloud level as well. Okay, so the key concept here is we need a better way of protecting in a faster manner. It's no good anymore to take that challenge away, think about it, look at it, and come up with a solution. By the time you've done that, they've changed the attack. They've used a different vector, used a different parameter. So these attacks are always moving, so you need an automated method. So the network behavior analysis is really the true way of being able to handle that intelligence. Okay. So if we look at laying plans then on how do we actually protect against that complex environment, if we just summarize again for the third time the challenging areas, and then we look at how we actually resolve these challenges. So the first thing is, again, building the network floods and the larger attacks. You need to be looking at some kind of cloud protection at this level. Okay, somebody to handle the high volumetric attacks, identifying the high volumetric attacks, and being able to protect against them without your pipes being saturated. So this is something where you need to be thinking about a cloud DDoS protection or some kind of DOS protection as well. You need to be thinking about SSL floods as well. So the protection that you have needs to be focused in not just HTTP but HTTPS as well. Okay, for the network-based attacks, you really need a behavioral analysis engine to protect you at that level. And again, this needs to encompass things like the low and slow, which is one of the more, as I say, dangerous and more difficult attacks to be able to protect against. Need some type of IPS solution, but an IPS designed specifically with DDoS in mind, so not a generic IPS. And lastly, at the application level, you need to be thinking about a web application firewall, so some kind of layer 7, true layer 7 firewall that can assist with protection in the back end. So this then brings into the final summary slide from Radware and Manx as a solution. What is it that Manx have actually deployed, and what is it that they can offer as a protection? So they've deployed a full solution, a full what we call on-demand switch. It's a device inline that provides them with full network behavior analysis of the data centers and understanding of the traffic flow through the data centers, with the ability then to provide the IPS and the DOS function from that point of view. Around that, they'll have the ability to offload that to cloud environments as well to provide full cloud mitigation and a full management structure, so a full security event information management to provide reporting and access into details about what's happened and where. In conjunction with that, they're supported by Radware's emergency response team. And Radware's emergency response team will be on hand 24/7 to support any live environment, live attacks, and actually assist with focusing on supporting and protecting and mitigating those live attacks. So in summary, what we have here is then the widest security coverage. So we are now protecting all the key attacks that we spoke about and all the challenges, the multi-vector attacks that we spoke about. We've got a very short time to protection as well. Our signatures can be created on the fly within 10 seconds with the ability to communicate across our platforms, to share intelligence and share knowledge, to not only protect quickly, but to reduce the false positives to a very low level. We have our emergency response team as a key contact, and the whole integrated solution has the ability to, as I say, to be aware of the traffic, of the flow, and of the applications. So thank you very much for listening to the presentation. That provides an overview of the Manx DDoS. Any questions, please feel free to contact either myself or your Manx representative. Thank you.